Well, good morning, everyone. Father John Wilson here. It's Friday, May 22nd, and today we are looking at the Third Commandment. So here it is quoted directly in the Catechism of the Catholic Church from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verses 8 through 10. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor, and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work. All right, so this is the third commandment. Honor the Lord's day by resting. So it's an interesting thing about how we human beings mark time. And the week, this period of 7 days, if you think about it, is unique among our various units of time, because it's the only unit of time we have that is essentially of supernatural origin. Like if you think about a day, well, a day is just how long it takes for the Earth to revolve on its axis. A year is how long it takes for the Earth to rotate around the sun. A month is more or less one rotation of the moon around the Earth. The week is, something given to us directly by God, not just through the medium of His creation. He commands us to rest on the seventh day, in imitation of Him. That's the interesting thing. This comes right from the book of Genesis, and it's hard to get away from this. Even if we don't honor Sunday, Sunday still exists. And we have some good examples in our history of how when we try to get away from God's plan for the pattern of our lives, the result is actually pretty ridiculous. So I'm just old enough to remember when school textbooks still used BC and AD for marking years before and after the birth of Christ. And recently we now have BCE and CE, before the current era or the common era. And this is a little bit annoying, but not too annoying, because if you think about it, we're all still using the birth of Christ as year zero. And even those who would like to get away from that, face the question, okay, what's your new year zero? You can't choose anything that's not ultimately man-made. And it was funny, the French tried. The French Revolution back in the 1790s was really committed to stripping as much as possible all of the remnants of Judeo-Christian revelation from society. So they actually came up with a new year zero, which was they chose the beginning of the French Revolution. And they actually attacked the week itself, right? This idea that we should order our lives on this cycle of 7 days. I said, no, that comes from Judaism and Christianity. Let's get rid of it. And so they instituted almost like the metric system week. A week is now 10 days. And go figure, this was super unpopular, especially with the working man, right? Because now it meant you only have 1 day in 10 off from work instead of 1 in 7. Goes to show you how God's command is actually the safeguard of our dignity. God commands us to rest because He rested. And we have great dignity here. Like He actually is commanding us to imitate Him. Now, we could ask the question, right? Okay, what does it mean that God rested? This is almost a strange expression, right? Because it doesn't mean He stopped being God for a day. It doesn't mean He took a vacation. Otherwise, the world would just disappear if God wasn't sustaining it and being at every moment. No, this idea of God's rest actually expresses is just who he is. God in himself is perfectly at peace with himself, with his own existence, with his own identity. He knows perfectly at every moment, I am good, and that's good. And likewise for us, rest is not the cessation of all activity. Otherwise, we would, disappear. Rest is to embrace the fullness of who we truly are. And unlike God, here's the problem, like our work can distract us from that. Because for us, unlike God, work is hard, right? You've got to put your whole energy very often into welding that pipe or preparing that tax return or fighting that fire. Even though those activities are not our ultimate identity. So what we need in our material bodily existence is a pattern for remembering who we are. And that's what rest is. And rest can be expressed in lots of different things, right? It can mean watching a ball game. It can mean cooking dinner for your family. It can mean those higher pursuits, music, study, works of charity. And when you get to the highest, right, the indispensable act of rest is actually the worship of God, because that's where we most perfectly become who we are. And that's when we most perfectly imitate his rest, because we agree with him by our act of worship. Yes, God, you are good, and that's good. And it's in the worship of God, that direct connection with our Creator, that we ourselves find our ultimate identity and our ultimate dignity. Now, it's interesting, if you look at the Gospels, our Lord Jesus Christ has a lot to say about the Sabbath. And he actually gets in a lot of fights about it, because in his context there's this finely developed legal tradition of what a good, faithful Jew can and can't do on the Sabbath day. And there are disagreements about this. First century Judaism was not a monolithic thing. And so when Jesus is, for instance, healing someone on the Sabbath, you've got people upset about this because they're saying, hey, that's work. You can't do that on the Sabbath. And our Lord's response is really important, and it's important to understand what he's doing here, because what he doesn't say is, hey guys, come on, don't take this so seriously, relax. No, he uses the opportunity to teach about his own identity. He says, the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. In other words, I am here to give this commandment its ultimate meaning. And what he could have said, because this is the ultimate truth of it, he could have said even, look, I am the Sabbath, because he is God incarnate, right? He is the perfection of God's rest, now in human form. So it's to be with him and to have him living within us that we become who we truly are, and we enter into God's rest. And that's why for us as Christians, Saturday was replaced by Sunday. Sunday fulfills Saturday, because Sunday, the day of the resurrection, is the day of the completion of Jesus' glorious work. He enters into his rest. And that's why for us as Catholics, the indispensable act of worship, of Sunday worship, is our assistance at the Holy Mass. That making present of his greatest work, of his death and resurrection. And this is it's our great joy, but it's also a grave obligation. We have to put God first, not just in some kind of abstract way, but by worshiping him in the most important way as he commands us, by giving him that first place, that non-negotiable place in our schedule. You know, it is a mortal sin. It breaks our friendship with God if we do not attend Sunday Mass, except for some grave reason, you know, like we're sick, or there's a pandemic, or there's a snowstorm. We have to put God first. And it's interesting. The Catechism also talks about our obligation as a society to honor Sunday, because, like we all know, this is really hard to do alone. It's hard to give God that first place on our Sunday morning when no one else who thinks that they have control over our schedule seems to care. And, you know, this can take some heroism to actually say, hey, no guys, I'll see you at the party a little bit later. I gotta go to Mass. Or, hey, we're not gonna do soccer practice this weekend if we can't find some other way to get to Mass. That takes some heroism. And sometimes following God does take heroism. You know, we are a church of the martyrs. But here's the important thing. We shouldn't be forcing other people to be heroes. We need to come together. We need to come together to take Sunday seriously yet again. And, a very wise priest I know has made the point, this is not coming from me, but I think we should be really praying, especially now, that one of the fruits of this time, the fruits of this time of lockdown, right, is that we actually reclaim Sunday as what it is. You know, we have the opportunity to take a fresh perspective on what's actually necessary in our schedule. And we should come together and say, hey, look, we're going to put God first again. And maybe even, start to push back against the sports leagues, the employers, and claim our dignity yet again. Claim our rights and our responsibilities as disciples of Jesus Christ, and take back our Sunday rest. God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.